Good afternoon, everyone. This is Pratik. Today is the 18th of April, 2024, and we're here to discuss the upcoming elections in India. The general elections in India are scheduled to take place from April 19th to 1st of June. The election results will be announced on the 4th of June. It stands to be the largest democratic exercise globally, with over 970 million eligible voters. The polling will be held in 7 phases, accounting for security and logistical requirements. The election is expected to witness intense competition as more than 2,000 political parties seek to gain their share of seats in the 543-seat parliament. We've noticed significant political activity in the country over the recent months, with road shows and foot marches by party leaders, regional parties coming together to form alliances, and of course parties releasing manifestos in a bid to rally voters in their favor. Raga, can you give us an insight on the political landscape of the elections?
Sure, Pratik. The primary competition that we're going to be seeing in India lies between two major alliances, which is the NDA, or the National Democratic Alliance, which is led by the incumbent Bharatiya Janata Party, of which Prime Minister Modi is a part of, and the opposition I.N.D.I.A alliance, which is led by the Indian National Congress, or the INC. To understand the BJP is essentially a right-wing Hindu nationalist party. It does a lot of work in this sphere, wherein there is an appeal to its right-wing Hindu nationalist vote base to solidify support. And the inauguration of the Ram Mandir is one of those examples which is widely expected to consolidate its Hindutva votes. The BJP will also target central government schemes to target the poor and middle class, and it will emphasize on infrastructure projects developed during Modi's tenure, which is the highways and the airports and digital connectivity. Right-wing Hindu nationalist rhetoric will be amplified over the course of the couple weeks, especially on polarizing issues like Pakistan or China, some Islamist terror groups or separatist Khalistan groups as well. When we look at the opposition side, the opposition's campaign is going to be focused on the government's perceived failures in job creation, inflation management, and also addressing certain level of social polarization. The INC and the opposition will likely target vulnerable demographic groups in its campaigning, which will include certain caste groups, farmers, and women, while also offering freebies to attract voters. Some concerns have come up over the last couple of weeks, especially over the central government's potential suppression of opposition voices. This includes the Delhi's Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal, who was arrested by central government agencies. And this has raised concerns about the potential misuse of government agencies against opposition figures. Another thing that's happened recently is the freezing of the Congress's accounts due to tax disputes. That has led to accusations of the central government, again, suppressing opposition voices right before the elections. So these allegations have also included the BJP receiving the highest electoral bond donations from private entities, which have sparked some concerns of abuse of power for partisan gain. However, the domestic popularity for the BJP remains largely unaffected, and they are positioned for victory essentially.
Thank you for those insights, Raga. The arrest of the opposition political party leaders, freezing of bank accounts, the details of electoral bonds being made public are indeed significant developments. We've also tracked the media coverage of the elections recently. So, Bhargav, can you tell us a little bit about the complexity of the election and if there is a level playing field ahead of the polling that is due to begin tomorrow?
Thank you, Pratik and Vaga. Those insights were quite valid. And I would like to take it from the arrest of the opposition parties and then get into the media aspect there. Because like everything else in a country like India, even the political landscape is quite convoluted. Now, when we look at the arrest and prosecution of opposition leaders, several convoluted questions do crop up. Now, just because they're in the opposition, does that mean they get a clean sheet? Should we categorically accuse the ruling government of misusing the agencies? There are indicators on both sides of the fence. Firstly, if we take the case of the Delhi Chief Minister, the excise policy on liquor, which was withdrawn within hours. So if everything was all right with the policy, why did they withdraw it? So if the questions are being raised about the enforcement directorate going after the ministers, including the chief minister, then they have no answer about why the withdrawal actually happened, right? If there was no wrongdoing. So similarly, when we talk of opposition leaders being prosecuted by central constitutional agencies of sorts, that is Central Bureau of Investigation, Enforcement Directorate, and a few others, these questions need to be addressed, and there is no clear answer to that. Now, at the same time, when we talk of media, now media is run by popular demand. They directly depend on the ad revenue, advertisements, and their ownership also matters. None of them are clearly owned or being directed with a heavy hand by the government, like we see in some of the neighboring countries or in the Middle East. For example, two or three major mainstream media networks are owned by the corporates such as Reliance, the I.N.D.I.A. So you can make a case that these corporates are closer to the current incumbent government, so they are likely to push a pro-government narrative. Now, that is very hard to argue with. At the same time, we need to also underline there are quite a few media houses which do drive an anti-government or a critical narrative of the government. To name a few, that the Wire, London Talk, they have not been categorically prosecuted, though there have been quite a few allegations of raids against these media houses. So we can't categorically say that the dominant figurehead, that is Modi, is targeting those who is criticizing him. At the same time, Modi's popularity itself can be attributed to lack of a figurehead or a major prime ministerial candidate in the opposition parties, mainly the Congress. Now, Congress has always held that we'll decide who the prime ministerial candidate will be after they win the election. It may be all right to talk of that in theory in a parliamentary system, but in reality, elections are won by leadership, the popular leadership. Of course, in 2004, they won without a popular prime ministerial candidate. Some projected Sonia Gandhi as one, but you can argue on both sides. But in reality, Modi's popularity and as a figurehead has added to the electoral advantage. At the same time, when there are criticisms of the government, especially from the West, of misusing the central agencies and inflicting damage to the institutions, the democratic institutions. Now, there are some valid concerns there. However, we need to understand India has a federalist administration with central government and the state governments. Very recently, in a major state like Karnataka in the south, BJP lost the election with a massive margin. It was a debacle of epic proportions for a party which was trying to penetrate in southern India. How did they lose if democracy was actually deteriorated? So these are some of the convoluted questions which need to be asked when there are media narratives being pushed saying India's democracy is threatened. Okay, so I hope that that makes sense, Pratik.
Thanks. Your perspectives do clarify a lot of things in this complex election environment we are in. So, Raga, back to you. The election narrative has been centered around development. While the incumbent party has claimed credit for the development in the past decade, the opposition has highlighted perceived shortcomings of the economy, especially in job creation and inflation, along with allegations of corrupt practices adopted by the government. Can you give us an insight into the current state of the economy and what we can expect?
Sure, Pratik. And as far as the economy is concerned, it has been a mixed bag over the last 10 years. What we can see under the Modi government, at least visibly, is that the people of the country have started buying houses faster than 10 years ago, which suggests the housing market is on rise. What we can also see is that the stock market is at an all-time high. Construction of the highways have sped up, especially evident while traveling through the length and breadth of this subcontinent. You can see that in the Northeast or states which have largely been ignored, like Uttarakhand. However, the share of manufacturing to the economy has remained stagnant around 18%. India's inability to spur its manufacturing sector is quite worrying because growth in the sector could largely, it could create jobs. Any reforms in the agriculture sector have monumentally failed by the Modi government. This is due to a trust deficit with the farming class. And this is a sector that sorely needs to be reformed with highly rudimentary agricultural practices. And transitioning from this agricultural-based economy to a manufacturing or services hub has been pretty formidable for the Modi government. Despite all of this, all of these challenges that we're seeing, India's GDP growth is projected to be anywhere between 6 to 8% by various global banks and credit rating agencies, and by its own account as well, by its different government bodies, which rate it on a quarterly basis. So currently, the July to September quarter was estimated to be about 7.6%, and there is a lot of optimism that this is a country that is in line to becoming the fastest growing economy. There are quite a few projections that are estimating that the economy will reach about 5 trillion over the next 5 to 7 years. Some sectors that are worth mentioning that have grown rapidly under the Modi government are IT, for example. The pharmaceutical sector is another, the BPO sector is another, mobile manufacturing, especially with Apple shifting its manufacturing from China towards India. We've also had the growth of e-commerce. Private conglomerates have grown as well, and the startup ecosystem has thrived in certain pockets in India, especially in Bangalore, in Gurgaon, Mumbai, and a couple of cities in India. Infrastructure development, which I mentioned, has been a priority and it has driven economic growth. Despite all of this, what we do see is that the youth unemployment remains as high as 23%, with the government struggling to address this slowdown in job creation, despite a significant population of the youth being here. I mean, this is a country which has the biggest youth population in the world, and it has not quite reaped the benefits of its demographic dividend. So some of these challenges have been summarized here. There is one more challenge that the Modi government has quite failed to tackle, which is its complex regulatory environment. Despite claims of positioning itself as a destination with its ease of doing business, that is largely not reflected in the rankings, and India still remains a country that does suffer from red tapeism and bureaucratic loopholes and challenges and hurdles. And corruption is entrenched at various levels of the government. Even if it may not be pervasive at the top levels, it is still pervasive ground up. So this pretty much sums up what's going on with the Indian economy.
Thank you for those insights, Raga. The economy indeed seems to be making a lot of noise, both in India as well as abroad. Now let's just move to the security environment. So we've seen attacks on religious processions yesterday in West Bengal, and encounters taking place in the Maoist insurgent areas affected in Chhattisgarh. So Bhargav, can you give us a little bit of an insight about the security environment during the elections?
Yes.
And the potential impact on business as well?
Certainly. So West Bengal, like you mentioned, is a hotbed for political violence, not just tensions. And security environment during the election period can be broadly categorized between low to medium as a whole. However, we need to keep in mind the political landscape as well as a risk of violence change depending on the state and the region we are looking at. To be more specific, disruptions will be high around polling days, especially around the polling stations and the government offices. And that constitutes a major issue for businesses rather than political violence per se. Specific areas such as Jammu and Kashmir, the northeastern states, the central states such as Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, which is also called Red Corridor, are rated high in terms of security risk due to the ongoing insurgencies and anti-leftist Maoist operations. Very recently, probably it was earlier this week, 29 Maoist cadre were gunned down by the security forces. Given the trend of similar operations, we can expect a retaliatory operation by the Maoist cadre. The security forces will be on high alert in these states. The main risk in urban and semi-urban areas will be from communal and political tensions, especially in some of the sensitive areas within the cities, especially in states such as West Bengal, Kerala, where we have seen pitched battles using crude bombs and firearms in some of the rural and semi-urban areas, like in northern part of Kerala. While the low scale of violence is expected and can't be ruled out during the election periods across the country, West Bengal and Kerala, as I said, take the center stage in such issues. High-risk areas will see an increased deployment of security forces, tight security measures to deter attacks by the insurgent groups such as the Maoists can be expected, especially around the polling areas. Security measures are significantly intensified in anticipation of elections in these regions, and we can see that even in terms of regular checkposts before and after entering a major town. We can see this even at the entrance of states, at the state borders. And during the elections, it's likely that the traffic will be disrupted between major states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, where major manufacturing industries are spread across the state lines. They can expect increased checking, and sometimes if the tensions are high, they may ban the traffic between the states. Prateek, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you outlined kind of characterizes the security environment for the coming 2 months. But I think the main challenge to businesses operating across multiple locations will be the disruption to logistics. And of course, like you mentioned, the risk from unrest is persistent, but I do think it'll be very specific to the localized security environments. And of course, organizations with staff or assets in high-risk areas like Jammu Kashmir, Northeast, as well as the Red Corridor in central India, will have the highest exposure to security risks. And we expect that the security will be scaled down post the announcement of results, especially when the post-poll violence risks have been assessed to have reduced. So that gives us a basic overview of the general elections in India, the security environment, and the impact on business. Thank you.
Prateek, just to outline, especially what you said for impact for businesses, they need to be cautious about painting with a broad brush as far as security concerns are concerned for the whole of the country. As you rightly said, there are specific areas where there needs to be higher caution, but major business hubs like Bangalore, Mumbai, Hyderabad, and others, and the manufacturing hubs, they are likely to have a higher deployment of security forces. Thus, the risk is much lower. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhargav.